The woman who opened the door was a stranger to me. But inside, the furniture, the family photo on the wall, the creaky swing on the veranda, it was all mine. I had become a guest in my own home. And then my daughter looked me in the eyes and said, "This place isn't yours anymore." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. My name is Dorothy. I'm 62 years old. And for most of my adult life, I believed in two things. 1, that love could carry you through anything. And 2, that children always remember who carried them. I was wrong on both. Let me take you back a bit. Before that door opened. Before the stranger looked me up and down like I was lost. Before my daughter, my own flesh and blood, uttered those 6 words that would split my world apart. Let me tell you about the years that built that house. I met Paul when I was 23. He was already building a life for himself. Not rich, not flashy, but steady. The kind of man who'd fix your car without asking questions. And come home with wildflowers just because the roadside ones were blooming. We built that villa together in our early 30s. It wasn't grand, not the kind that makes magazine covers. But every tile, every creaky step on the staircase, held a story. Paul sanded the wood floors himself. I chose the soft yellow for the kitchen walls. We argued about curtains and laughed about plumbing. That villa, it became our 3rd member of the marriage. Then Amelia came along. And everything shifted again. I left my job at the small local paper. Journalism was never just work for me, but a calling, and became a full-time mother. I didn't regret it. At least, not then. Amelia was a curious, intense little girl. She spoke early, asked impossible questions, and hated pink. Insisted it was a nonsense color. Paul adored her. They would spend hours outside under the grapevine pergola, building forts or dissecting flower petals. She was my world. And slowly, I let go of everything else for her. My career, my friends, my creative voice. All in exchange for school drop-offs, violin lessons, and baking science project volcanoes at midnight. And I don't tell you this for sympathy. I tell you this so you understand what it meant when she changed. Because love isn't blind. Love is a choice. And I chose her. Again and again and again. The first sign came after Paul passed away. It was sudden. A heart attack in the garden. I was the one who found him. Face down among the tomatoes he'd planted with so much care. Amelia was already in college. She came home for the funeral and left the next day. No long talks, no shared grieving. Just, "Mom, I have exams," and a cold kiss on my cheek. At the time, I thought it was her way of coping. But the distance grew. And grew. She met Ethan her junior year. Business student. Well-dressed. Well-spoken. Well, a little too polished for my taste. When he first came to dinner, he complimented everything. The lasagna. The candles. Even the chipped plates. But there was something in his eyes. Something I couldn't place. Like he was cataloging everything he saw. Later, I found him in Paul's study. Just looking around. "Nice space," he said, running his fingers over Paul's old desk. "Bit outdated, though. Have you ever thought of modernizing?" I laughed. He didn't. Amelia fell hard. They graduated. Got engaged within a year. I offered to host the engagement dinner at the villa. She refused. Said Ethan's parents had better space. That stung. Not because I needed to impress anyone, but because she'd once told me our garden was the most magical place in the world. Still, I smiled. I wore my best dress. I brought a bottle of wine older than her college diploma. But when I arrived, I was seated at a far table, next to people I didn't know. And when they gave a toast, thanking the Novak family for their incredible hospitality, Ethan's family, my name wasn't even mentioned. I remember sitting there, hands folded, wondering how a name could disappear so quietly from its own story. That was the first real crack. The first moment I realized I was slowly being edited out of her life. But I told myself I was imagining it. Mothers doubt themselves too often. We gaslight our own instincts because we want to believe the best in our children. So when she asked months later if she and Ethan could stay at the villa for just a few weeks, I said yes. Of course I said yes. I didn't know that the walls I once painted with love would soon echo with unfamiliar laughter. That the swing Paul built would carry strangers. That the family photo above the stairs would be taken down, face by face. That came later. But the story starts here, with a mother who thought love meant giving everything, and a daughter who believed that meant she owned it. There's a moment after betrayal when the world doesn't fall apart. It just freezes. I sat in my car outside that villa, my villa, for over an hour after she said those words. This place isn't yours anymore. I didn't scream. Didn't cry. Not then. Because when pain reaches a certain depth, it doesn't explode. It calcifies. And as I sat behind the wheel, I remembered a birthday party. Amelia was 6. We had baked cupcakes together the night before, each with a different colored icing. She'd insisted on doing the frosting herself. I let her. They were lopsided, messy, and absolutely perfect. I spent all day setting up in the backyard. Streamers, paper lanterns, the big wooden table under the tree. We invited the whole class. And one little girl, Holly, arrived without a gift. Her family was struggling. Amelia noticed but didn't say a word. Instead, later that evening, she took the biggest cupcake, wrapped it carefully, and slipped it into Holly's backpack when no one was looking. That was the child I raised. Where did she go? I drove away that day without knowing where to go. I didn't want to go back to the rental flat I'd been staying in while renovations were supposedly being done at the villa. Spoiler, there were no renovations. That was just the excuse they gave me to move in. I ended up at a Café Paul, and I used to frequent. Sat at the corner booth. Ordered chamomile tea. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel rage. Not sadness. Not disappointment. But real, trembling, cold-skin rage. I opened my phone. Pulled up old photos. There we were. Paul and I in front of the villa. Right after it was finished. Amelia as a toddler on the swing. Her high school graduation on the veranda. I tapped through hundreds of memories. Each one confirming what I already knew deep in my bones. That house wasn't just a house. It was the story of my life. And now someone else was flipping to the last page and scribbling over the ending. I needed answers. And more than that, I needed to remember exactly what I had signed away. I went home and dug through the fireproof box under my bed. There it was. The deed to the house. Signed. Co-owned. Dorothy Elaine Maynard and Amelia Grace Maynard. It had felt right at the time. Paul was gone. She was all I had. I wanted to avoid probate if something ever happened to me. So I gave her 50% ownership, never imagining she'd treat it like 100%. But here's what I hadn't done. I hadn't transferred full control. And I certainly hadn't relinquished my right to live there. There was no rental agreement. No eviction. No formal notice. Which meant legally, I was still part owner. And even more than that, I had been pushed out of my own residence without due process. I may have left journalism for motherhood, but my research instincts were intact. The next day, I went to see Miriam Langley, an old friend, one of the few people I'd kept in my life since those early years. She was a retired attorney, sharp as a whip even in her 70s. She read the documents, didn't say much, just sipped her black coffee and raised an eyebrow. "Dorothy," she said slowly, "this isn't just about property. This is about erasure. You didn't give them the house. They just took it like you were already dead." Her words stung, but they were true. I asked if I had a case. She nodded. "Not only do you have legal standing, you have something even more powerful, documentation. And a daughter who didn't cover her tracks because she thought you wouldn't fight back." That was the moment I realized what they'd all believed. That I was too old, too soft, too dependent. They had rewritten the story in their minds. And now it was time I rewrote it in mine. Miriam helped me draft a letter. Not a lawsuit, not yet. Just a formal notice of ownership. And a request for immediate meeting regarding residency. It was polite, professional, and terrifying, because underneath all the law and logic, I was still a mother, and Amelia was still my daughter. I kept picturing her as a little girl, in overalls, holding out a wilted daisy, saying, "For you, Mama." I mailed the letter, certified, tracked, and waited. 1 day, 2, no response. On the 3rd day, my phone rang. "Mom," her voice sharp. "What the hell is this? Some kind of threat?" I stood in my tiny kitchen, hands trembling. "I just want to talk," I said. "To have a real conversation, not in the driveway, not through strangers, but you and me." She scoffed. "You're making this so dramatic. You're acting like we stole something." I paused, chose my words carefully. "You didn't steal the villa, Amelia. You stole me out of it." Silence. Then she hung up. I sat down slowly. My knees were shaking, but my heart wasn't. For the first time in years, I felt something return to me. Voice. Power. Will. Not the kind you sign at a lawyer's office, but the one you write in your mind. That says, I am not done. I will not vanish quietly. And no one gets to turn the page without me. They smiled a lot. That family. Polished teeth. Perfect posture. Polite manners. But behind every smile, I now saw a strategy. Ethan's family didn't just take my villa. They absorbed it, rebranded it, and worst of all, they were preparing to erase me completely. After Amelia hung up on me, I didn't try to call again. Instead, I started researching. I wasn't looking for drama. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for patterns. What I found made my hands tremble. The Novak family, Ethan's parents, were not strangers to real estate. They had flipped houses for years. Not officially, but subtly, quietly. They would find vulnerable owners, suggest temporary stays, then slowly take over. It wasn't illegal. It was predatory. They called it passive repositioning. I called it manipulation. They'd done it before. And now my villa was next. The first real clue came from an old friend of Paul's, Leonard. He'd been our neighbor for years. An odd man, quiet, always fixing things. Paul trusted him. I ran into him by chance at the post office. He looked surprised to see me. Dorothy, I thought you'd moved permanently. I frowned. Why would you think that? He scratched his chin. Well, Amelia told the landscapers that you were settling abroad. Said the villa was being restructured for long-term family use. That night I barely slept. Long-term family use. What did that mean? I dug deeper. I searched Ethan's mother, Nadine Novak, in local property forums. And there it was. A listing. Private, unlisted, but cashed. Villa for long-term lease. Described as charming Mediterranean-style family estate. Contact. n.novak@ngroupproperties.com. I clicked the cached page. There were photos. Photos of my house. My living room. The fireplace Paul built. The kitchen with the yellow walls I painted with my own hands. No mention of me. No name. Just, this rare gem is finally available to the right tenants. They weren't just occupying it. They were preparing to profit from it. That's when I realized. This wasn't about my daughter needing space. This was about a family that saw vulnerability as an opportunity. I called Miriam again. Read her the listing over the phone. She exhaled sharply. That's not just rude. It's legally questionable. You're co-owner. They can't lease the property without your written consent. I asked what I could do. Plenty, she said. But first, you need to be sure Amelia is truly involved in this, or if she's just being pulled along. That thought haunted me. Was she part of the plan, or just too deep to climb out of it? I remembered a night. 3 years ago. Amelia had come over alone late, looking tired. We sat on the porch. She held her wine glass like it weighed 10 pounds. Sometimes I feel like I'm being managed, not married, she said. I asked if she was okay. She just shrugged. He's good at convincing me of things. Things I didn't even know I agreed to. That was the first and last time she ever spoke that way. After that, she was all smiles again. Publicly united. Privately silent. Back in the present, I printed the cash listing. Miriam said it could be used as evidence. Not just in civil proceedings, but in public opinion. They're counting on you to stay quiet, Dorothy. You've been trained your whole life to be agreeable, to not rock the boat. But that boat is sinking, and they're steering it with your house as their flag. I needed proof of activity, something recent, so I drove to the villa again, parked across the street, sat in Leonard's driveway, pretending to check my phone. The house looked different, colder. The warm ivy was gone, replaced by artificial hedges. The swing Paul built had been taken down, replaced by a welcome sign with the Novak family crest on it. I wanted to scream. Instead, I took photos. Every corner, every detail. I zoomed in on the mailbox, a new nameplate. Novak residence. They'd gone that far. Changed the plate on the gate. As if I'd died. Just as I was about to leave, someone exited the house. It was Nadine, Ethan's mother. She walked to the edge of the driveway. Spoke with 2 men in business suits. Handed them brochures. They pointed around. Smiled. Nodded. One of them shook her hand. Firm. Like a deal had been made. I sent the photos to Miriam. She replied in all caps. Do not confront yet. We'll hit them with everything at once. But I wasn't thinking legal strategy anymore. I was thinking betrayal. By blood. By marriage. by people who once clinked glasses in my living room and toasted to family forever. Later that night, I got a message. A short one. From Amelia. Please stop watching the house. This is getting uncomfortable. I stared at it for a long time. Not because of what it said, but because she'd called it the house. Not home. Not our villa. Just the house. Like it was already gone. But it wasn't gone. Not yet. I still had half the deed. I still had memory. And I still had something they would never see coming. I used to think strength was loud. Something you shouted to make people listen. Something worn like armor. But real strength is quieter. It moves like water. Steady. Persistent. Able to reshape mountains, not through force, but through time. They thought I was weak. Because I didn't slam doors. Because I didn't fight back the moment they pushed me out. But they were wrong. The day after I saw Nadine handing out brochures for my home, I put on my navy blue coat. Not the soft one I wear to garden. The one Paul always called my "don't mess with her" jacket. And I drove to Miriam's office. She had already printed the formal demand letter. Thick pages in a stiff folder. Lined with all the proof. The cashed listing. The mailbox photo. The nameplate. The co-ownership deed. The local ordinances about unlawful occupancy and leasing without consent. It was the thickest folder I'd held since the birth of my daughter. "Do you want to hand deliver it?" she asked me. I did. And I would. But not today. Today I needed to prepare. Not for court. But for battle. I started visiting the villa more frequently. Not to confront. To watch. To take notes. Photograph deliveries. Document changes. Record overheard conversations from neighbors who were happy to gossip. They told the pest control guy they're the sole owners, one woman whispered. They're remodeling the inside, said another. Tore out the whole back patio last week. Every detail. Another page in the evidence pile. A week later, I drove to the villa at noon. I stood at the gate. Pressed the buzzer. Nadine answered the intercom. "This is Dorothy," I said. "I'd like to speak to my daughter." There was a pause. Then static. Then silence. I waited 10 minutes. No one came out. I left the envelope tucked between the iron bars of the gate. It was labeled, CO owner notice, legal consultation. Nothing dramatic. Just facts. The next day, I received a text from Amelia. "I got your folder. This is too far, Mom. We're family. You don't take legal action against family." I stared at that message for a long time. Then typed back. "You're right. So why did you erase me from mine?" She never replied. 2 days later, Miriam called. "We've been served a reply. They've hired counsel." It was happening. Finally, the dance was over. Now we would speak in papers and filings. The first hearing was procedural, just to establish the facts. But I showed up, in that same navy blue coat. Hair pulled back. Face calm. Amelia sat at the other end of the room. She didn't look at me. Ethan did. His gaze was flat. Like a man watching a game, he assumed he'd already won. His mother didn't come. But their lawyer was smug. "You'll see," Miriam said after. "People like that always underestimate women like you." Weeks passed. Emails. Phone calls. Declarations. I started sleeping better, even as the pressure grew. Because for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally seen. Not as a mother or widow, but as a woman reclaiming her ground. One morning, I was walking to the mailbox when Leonard waved me down. "I saw something," he said. "Figured you'd want to know." He pulled out his phone. Showed me a photo. A moving truck. In front of my villa. They were clearing things out. Fast. Within 3 days. Most of the Novak family furniture was gone. But they didn't leave quietly. I received a call from Nadine. Yes, Nadine. She introduced herself as if we hadn't met. As if she hadn't opened my door that day and told me I didn't belong. "I just want to clarify," she said, her voice sugary and sharp, "that this entire situation could have been avoided. We had plans. Better ones than you ever had for that house." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't justify myself. I simply said, "You made one mistake, Mrs. Novak. You assumed I was already gone." And then I hung up. The final hearing was different. The judge reviewed every document. Every photo. Every email. He turned to Amelia. Asked, "Do you understand what co-ownership means?" She hesitated. "Yes," she said quietly. "Then why was your mother excluded from all decisions regarding the residence?" No answer. My heart ached. Not from anger, but grief. She looked small. Not like a villain. but like a child caught in a lie too large to undo. The ruling came in my favor. Of course it did. I had the law, the truth, the paper trail. They were given 30 days to vacate. All leasing intentions were nullified. The nameplate ordered to be removed. I stood in front of the house again. The gate opened this time. Not by a stranger, but by me. The house was quiet, smelled like lavender and fresh paint. The swing was gone, but I still had the hooks. I would rebuild it. For me, not for anyone else. I walked into Paul's study, touched the bookshelf, whispered, "We're home." It took me 3 weeks to bring the house back to life. Not because of the damage, but because of what had been erased. Photos, curtains, even the humming sound of the refrigerator that Paul had installed himself, replaced by some sleek new machine that looked like it belonged in a showroom. I had the old one brought back from the shed. I polished every tile, rehung the old frames. I wasn't just redecorating. I was recentering, putting my history back into its rightful place. The day they left, they didn't say goodbye. No note, no apology, just a moving truck and silence. I stood behind the curtains and watched. Amelia walked out last. Her steps were slow, but her back was straight. She looked up, saw the curtains shift, but didn't wave, didn't pause. Then she got in the car and disappeared from my driveway. I thought that was the end of it. I really did. I thought I'd go back to cooking for one, reading on the sun porch, maybe planting roses again in Paul's old patch. But peace, it seems, was a luxury I wasn't allowed to keep. It started with the letters, thin white envelopes with no return address, typed notes, passive-aggressive words. "It's not too late to sell while the market's hot. You could use the money for retirement. Be reasonable, Dorothy." Then came the visitors, real estate agents, unannounced, walking up the driveway asking if the villa was for sale, claiming they'd spoken to a family member. I told them no, again and again, but the message was clear. They were still trying to push me out. Then one morning, I heard gravel crunching outside. Opened the door and there she was, Amelia, holding a thermos of coffee like this was a casual drop-in. "I thought we could talk," she said. I let her in, not because I wanted to, but because she was my daughter, and I wanted to believe she still had something left inside her that remembered what we were. She didn't sit. She walked around the living room, looking at the furniture like it was foreign. "This place feels smaller," she said. "No," I replied. "It's just no longer trying to impress anyone." She flinched at that. "Good." Then she turned to face me. "Mom, we both know this house isn't practical for you. It's too big, too much upkeep. You should consider selling." I didn't say anything. She continued. "Ethan's family made mistakes. I made mistakes. But this house, it doesn't work unless it's part of something bigger." I looked her in the eyes and asked, "Something bigger or something richer?" Silence. Then I reached under the coffee table, pulled out a folder. "I knew you'd come," I said. "So I prepared something." I slid it across the table. She hesitated before opening it. Inside were the renovation permits Ethan's family had filed without my consent. The lease agreement draft they'd prepared with a real estate lawyer. Screenshots of emails between Nadine and her broker, discussing final transfer possibilities. And copies of the threatening letters. Amelia turned pale. I didn't know about some of this. "But you knew about enough," I said. "You knew when I was locked out. You knew when you changed the name on the mailbox. You knew when you let strangers take down your father's swing." Her eyes welled up, but I didn't move to comfort her. Because I wasn't here to play mother anymore. Not until she learned how to be a daughter again. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I want you to stop pretending this was ever about helping me. I want you to own what you did. And then, I want you to leave." Her jaw tightened. She stood, straightened her coat. "For what it's worth," she said. "I didn't think you'd fight back." "I know," I replied. "That's why you lost." As she walked to the door, she paused. "You used to say everything you had would be mine someday." I nodded. "I did. But now I see. What I built wasn't for inheritance. It was for legacy. And you don't just get to claim that. You have to live it." She didn't respond, just walked out. And this time, I didn't watch her leave. I sat down and exhaled. Not sadness, not victory, something in between. Peace. Earned. Fought for. Kept. It took me 2 weeks to choose the sign. Not because I was undecided, but because I wanted the words to be right. This wasn't just a gate anymore. It was a line drawn in quiet defiance. A statement. They had called it the Novak Villa. They had erased my name, rebranded my past. But I wasn't just taking the house back. I was reclaiming my story. I called a local craftsman, an older man named Elias. He worked out of a barn with his son. Steel, oak, bronze. He did it all by hand. When I told him what I wanted, he smiled. "You sure you want it to say that?" he asked. "It's a bit bold." I nodded. For once in my life, I'm not afraid to be bold. The day he installed it, I stood by the garden gate, watching the letters come together. Dorothy's house. Simple, clear, undeniable. Not the Maynard residence. Not Villa Parkside. Not anything inherited or imposed. It was mine, because I chose it to be. That afternoon, Leonard came by with a fresh basket of lemons. He squinted at the new sign, then chuckled. "About damn time," he said. I started changing other things too. Little by little, the roses went back in. Not just Paul's old patch. I added a whole row along the fence line. I repainted the front door. The same color it was in the 90s. A bold, cheerful teal. The kind Paul thought was too bright, but Amelia had loved as a child. And in the sunroom, I opened the windows again. Let the light in. Let myself in. I started hosting again. Nothing fancy. Afternoon teas. Craft nights. A few old friends from the paper. Neighbors I'd never spoken to before. One of them, a woman named Rachel, asked if I'd ever consider running small retreats. For widows. For women starting over. People who needed a place to breathe again. I hadn't thought about it before. But suddenly, the idea felt like something worth saying yes to. Not to prove anything. Not to fight anyone. Just because it felt right. Amelia didn't call. Didn't write. And I didn't chase her. I didn't know if she would ever understand. Or if understanding even mattered anymore. Love is not blind. Not anymore. Love sees. And it decides anyway. One Saturday morning, I was watering the roses when I saw a car parked just down the road. Black sedan. Windows tinted. I knew the silhouette in the driver's seat. Amelia. She didn't get out. Didn't wave. She just sat there. Looking. Maybe at the sign. Maybe at the swing I had rebuilt. Maybe at the pieces of a life she once claimed. Then the car pulled away. I didn't feel sad. Or angry. Just aware. Aware that some distances never close. Some gaps grow roots. And some silences are permanent. But that doesn't mean you stop growing. One evening, I stood on the veranda. The sun was setting in gold and peach. I held a glass of iced tea. And I looked at the gate. The sign gleamed in the last light of day. Dorothy's house. It didn't feel defiant anymore. It just felt true. I walked into Paul's old study, lit a candle, and opened a journal. Not to write what had happened, but what I wanted to build next. A small writing group. A mentorship program. Workshops for women reclaiming their stories. Because the greatest revenge is not taking something back. It's building something no one can take away. Would you name something after yourself? Not for vanity, but for truth? Tell me in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this one. Stories about survival, reinvention, and quiet rebellion. Because this isn't just the end of the story. It's the start of a new one. From the ashes of betrayal, I built a home. Not just of walls, but of memory, intention, and strength. This is Dorothy's house. And no one will ever take it again.